Let freedom ring. You're listening to The Curtis Report on 570 KLIF.
I say to you today, my friend, let freedom ring.
The newest voice for the conservative American. It's about faith. It's about family. It's about freedom.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Barry Curtis and The Curtis Report starts now.
Thanks and welcome to another edition of The Curtis Report. I'm your host, Barry Curtis, of course, where we talk about family, faith, and freedom. Oh, this is an awesome show we got lined up for you today. And an amazing guest who will be with us all hour long. And that's Sam Brown. We'll be with Sam here in just a second here. But we want to welcome all of you, no matter how you're listening to us, be it iHeartRadio, if you're listening on the actual call letters to the station that we're broadcasting on today, or if you're listening to through the Curtis Report website, which is www.thecurtisreport.com or thecurtisinitiative.com. You can listen through there as well. If you're viewing our podcast, or just listening to our regular podcast or video podcast is what I meant to say. No matter, we welcome you all and we appreciate your listening to us, no matter how you're listening to us. You know, we do talk about family, faith, and freedom on our website. If you go on our website, thecurtisinitiative.com, we're interactive here, see? Interactive. Audio, video, and a website. You can see former guests, our current guests in the studio today, and future guests that we have coming up in the studio here soon. A couple different things, just a couple of house cleaning things here real quick. We've got coming up next week, Buck Revelle. This is going to be really interesting. Buck Revelle is going to be in the studio next week. We'll be talking about the 50th anniversary of the assassination of President Kennedy. And Buck Revelle is a former FBI field office person who was in charge here, and he's a former number 2 of the FBI. Good friend of the Curtis Report, Buck Revelle. Have him in studio next week talking about all of that stuff. Jack Duffy probably will be with us as well. He's written some conspiracy kind of type books on the Kennedy assassinations. We'll have both points of view. Be kind of an interesting thing. Before we get to our guest there, Virginia. Elections Tuesday in the great state of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia. We got Terry McAuliffe, the Democratic candidate, opposing the Republican, the challenger, rather, is Republican candidate, Ken Cuccinelli. If you'd asked me about a week ago, if I thought Ken Cuccinelli was going to win, I'd say, I have some concerns. I don't know. He's closing this gap here. Terry McAuliffe, of course, is a good friend of the Clintons and very close to the Obamas. In fact, Bill Clinton will be there tomorrow. I think Mr. Obama is going to be there tomorrow, too, or maybe even on Election Day on Tuesday. Very interesting race. The best of Ken Cuccinelli. I hope you pull that thing out, my friend. Virginia used to be really red. It's really turned to a blue state. In fact, if Terry McAuliffe wins, the entire top level offices of the state will all be Democratic. Very, very interesting there. And of course, in New Jersey, Governor Chris Christie's, I think he's got some 25, 30-point lead there. So I think he'll be fine there in New Jersey. We'll be talking about all that next week as well. See if there's any surprises there in Virginia. They're coming up. Again, you can check on our website, thecurtisinitiative.com, for all that kind of stuff there. It is a pleasure, and it really is an honor to introduce to you our studio and guest in the studio today, Sam Brown, who's the Republican candidate for Texas State House District 102. Sam Brown, welcome to the Curtis Report.
Thank you, Barry. I appreciate you having me on.
Now, you've been highly anticipated. I'm telling you, you're probably, for me personally, the most anticipated guest in the last 6 months. I have heard so much about you. I have read so much about you, and I've got a little surprise here for you, because what I did was I communicated with some folks you may know, and asked them, and basically what I did. This is really Sam, and I promise I'm gonna let you talk here in a minute, but you know the Curtis Report. Right. It's just fascinating because I usually do this with certain guests and I would say, tell me your opinion of so-and-so political figure. And I usually get a response back, but sometimes people off the record will say, oh, well, Barry, I really don't want to comment about him, is whatever. Nobody did this. I have never, ever had a situation 100% of the people that I reached out to has something positive to say. This is really cool. Here, Tony Otterburn. You know Tony, fellow vet, A great guy, friend of the Curtis Report. He said this about you, and I quote, a profile of you, a profile in courage, the personification of a warrior and servant to our nation, a future leader of Texas and the country. That's some powerful stuff right there. Kirk Launius, local conservative activist. In fact, he was a candidate for Dallas County Sheriff, barely lost that race there. He says of you, Sam is a true American patriot hero. He's proven it on the battlefield. He'll never take his fellow Americans for granted. I like this part here. Service is not what he does, it's what he is. Malachi Boyles, I know you know Malachi, running for Texas Railroad Commissioner. He says this about you. Good guy. Served our country with honor. Is part of the next generation of who understands the importance of stepping up and taking responsibility for our future. Now that's some ringing statements there, Sam Brown. And I tell us how do your colleagues get to that point with you?
You know, Barry, I got to start out by saying that there's an incredible weight that one can feel having those expectations to live up to. And yet, there is an even more incredible weight that comes from having served with other men and women in uniform overseas and knowing the sacrifice that many, many countless people have put their lives on the line, and some even gave their lives for the idea of this country and in defense of our Constitution. Right. And so extremely flattering remarks, and yet I've got an even greater weight, which is to uphold the honor of those who've served before us. And I was warned beforehand of your great modesty and how you would downplay that. And that's just kind of who you are, and kind of apparently what many of the Curtis Report listeners love. There are thousands of people on Facebook that have commented about you, just overwhelming. But let's go back a little bit, because I want to kind of introduce to you, this is your first time on the show here, and we appreciate you being here, introduce you to our wider audience here. Tell us about your childhood, mother, father. I was raised as the oldest of 5 children. My father grew up and had a desire to serve his country, and yet family was very important to him. And so he enlisted in the National Guard, and that way he could stay close to home, but he would be available if the country needed him. And so he raised my brothers and I and my one sister with the idea of service to the nation is a responsibility. It's not an option. And so as the oldest of 5 children, I saw him model that in the home. And we didn't come from an extremely wealthy family. In fact, I remember very specifically the evening before I started high school. He sat me down after dinner one night, and this was at the kitchen counter, and the rest of the family was kind of run off doing homework and other things. And he said, "Son, I need to talk to you. You're about to start high school, which is important in setting you up for a college. And if you want an education beyond high school, you're going to have to work very hard. I can't afford to send you to college. So make this count. And oh, by the way, I recommend you consider one of the service academies. You'll have an opportunity to serve your country, and it won't cost you anything." And so I set my mind to it right then and there that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted a great education, but I wanted to serve my country also, and that was a great thing to pursue. As a child, would you characterize your childhood, or being a child and looking to your future, as did you want to be a warrior? I did. And this is one of the things that it's interesting to look back on combat, being a warrior. Right. Hollywood really glamorizes what war is. Right. In many cases, there's a love story, that's part of the subplot. There's a lot of explosions. There's heroism. And so, I think that there was a little bit of wanting to be a warrior. Right. But for me, being a warrior became a reality. And that's a good thing, isn't it?
I mean, we take and the kind of part of the takeaway from that is, isn't it? I mean, that's kind of it personifies kind of who we are. I mean, sometimes we shy away from now saying, "I want to be a warrior." That warrior spirit is downplayed so much now. But there's nothing wrong with that warrior spirit, is there?
No, I don't believe there's anything wrong with the warrior spirit. I'd much rather have a country of warriors than anything else. The thing that was different for especially my class of men and women entering West Point was that we were seniors in high school when the Twin Towers and Pentagon, Flight 93, all hit. And so we entered eventual service to the country at war.
Right.
And we hadn't had that happen in years.
And thank God for the warrior spirit we had there for that purpose that was there available to us. When we come back, we're going to talk about West Point and Afghanistan and that fateful day in Afghanistan when the Curtis Report continues in just a moment.
We are talking about American exceptionalism. Get involved with the conversation. Call in with your questions at 888-787-KLIF. It's about family, faith, and freedom. Now, let's get back to the Curtis Report with our host, Barry Curtis.
Thanks and welcome back to the Curtis Report. We appreciate you being here. Fascinating discussion all hour long with Sam Brown. He's candidate for Texas House District 102, an American patriot and hero, and it's just an honor to have him in the studio. When we left, we were talking about his childhood and West Point. You were accepted when to West Point?
I was accepted in October of 2001, so a little over a month after 9/11. I got my acceptance letter, and I started there the next summer of 2002.
And so you entered West Point in a time of war.
Absolutely.
Did you feel prepared? Did you feel this is part of your destiny, was to go and to be engaged in America's wars for America's defense?
No and yes. In terms of being prepared, who knows how to prepare for war? I'm not sure that one who's not experienced that can fully prepare for war. In terms of, as you say, destiny, I felt like I was where I was supposed to be. And I knew that this was my first experience with people who want to see the demise of our country. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't stand for that.
You served how long in Afghanistan?
I was in Afghanistan for only 2 months.
Yeah. Take us back to that time, that day in Afghanistan, where you were wounded. If we can go specifically to that day. Now, you were working actually, I don't know if there's any mundane duty in Afghanistan, but you were not necessarily specific in the combat zone at that point in time, the original duty you were doing before you got that fateful call.
Right. It's this was, right as at the tail end of the Iraqi surge. So Afghanistan was not in the news a whole lot. We hadn't really surged our troops into Afghanistan. So there was large areas of Afghanistan that just didn't see any coalition forces. And so the Taliban really had some rest and recovery places. And the part of Kandahar that our battalion moved into was really absent of coalition forces. And so we were the first boots on the ground, as we would say, in that particular district where we were planning a permanent presence. And so it was a little mundane. We were building what we call a FOB, a forward operating base, which many people I'm sure are familiar with. And I think we literally caught the Taliban off guard by planting our flag there, that they were not organized enough to attack us right away.
Now, that's because obviously there was it was an ambush of a convoy that was separate from your duty area. There was a convoy. There were American brothers and sisters in trouble, and you answered the call. Now, when you answered that call to go and to defend your brothers there, were you thrilled, exhilarated? How did you feel about, okay, I'm going to combat, something that you wanted?
Like so many things in life, there's there's no way of knowing what that next moment holds for you. We were providing security on a route, and a sister platoon from our company was just a few kilometers north of us. In fact, a classmate of mine from West Point, a dear friend of mine, was the platoon leader of that platoon. And so we had trained for a year together, deployed together. We're obviously operating in the same space together. And then we heard the radio call. And that radio call, and mind you, it was dusk. The sun had already set. So there was just that last bit of daylight. And I could still see, and I was eating my what was to be, almost my final meal. I had the Humvee door propped open, and then I heard it on the radio that there was an ambush. And there was nothing to do but just to go support and to react. And it was happening so quickly. I don't know that I had any really organized thoughts other than what I had been trained to do, which was to seek out the enemy and destroy them. So much so was my focus on that, I didn't see the IED coming that took out our vehicle.
And now, so your vehicle was on the way to support your sister platoon. Take me to that. What do you remember at that point when the Humvee hit the IED? Which an IED is an improvised explosive device set by the enemy.
Right. Yeah. And other folks call it roadside bombs.
Yeah.
It was there was three distinct feelings, and all simultaneous. There was a brilliant flash of orange flame that just engulfed the entire internal part of the vehicle. I instantly could not hear anything, and there was this crushing, sinking feeling of my body just sinking into the seat beneath me as the vehicle was thrown. Our trail vehicle said it was thrown about 20 or 30 feet in the air. And I knew in that moment we had just hit this roadside bomb.
So you knew it?
I knew it, absolutely.
Yeah.
It did not knock me unconscious.
What happened then? The Humvee tumbled?
It landed wheel side down.
Wheel side down.
So it was
Okay.
It was upright. And
what was happening in the vehicle around you?
It was an absolute inferno.
Okay.
I could, because my face was literally on fire, and I was soaked in diesel, and that's why I burned for so long. It hit the explosion hit right by the fuel tank. I couldn't see anyone else. The only thing I could hear besides the roar of the flames was my own voice screaming to God. That was the first thing I audibly said. Was I threw my arms in the air and I screamed, "Jesus, save me!" And
at that point, did you think you were going to die?
Not at that point. Flash forward a few moments later, after I'd been fighting the flames, and I had done everything I knew to do in my own physical strength.
Now, were you out of the vehicle at this point?
I got out of the vehicle
On your own.
I was either blown out of the vehicle or I'm out of the vehicle.
You're unsure. Okay.
And I fought it as much as I could, and I hit a point, and this is very significant in my life. I hit a point as I was face first lying in the dirt, screaming out to my Creator, where my last thought was, how long will this take for me to die? And what is the transition from this life to the next life? And I gave up the will to live. The next moment, I heard my gunner's voice, and he comes running up to me and he says, "Sir, I've got you, I've got you, I've got you." And I could feel dirt being thrown on my body to smother the flames. And boom, I knew I was going to live. And I knew that there had to be a purpose for me beyond that moment. I should not have survived that without a greater mission in life.
I've read some reports where it may have been the same. It was a private that you were given directions to. You had gloves on. To remove your gloves, and I just thought that was read that this morning. My heart sank. I just thought that was just extraordinary. I'll let you tell it. What about the gloves? You were asking him to take your gloves off.
I did. You can just imagine the pain of a burn. And my particular burns basically burned me from my fingertips all the way up to my armpits, my shoulder blades, my neck and my face, both of my legs to a certain extent, and my backside. And my hands were swelling up in my gloves, my combat gloves, really thick leather. And so I had even more pain there, and I did know it. It was almost just instinctual. I asked him to remove the gloves, and the doctors told me later on, had they not been removed, it's very likely I would have had more damage, may have even lost a good part of my hand.
But I kind of want to, I don't mean to, but you had to give, my understanding is, orders to him twice because he couldn't get the gloves off, right? Initially.
Right. No, yeah, that is correct.
And I kind of want to give the sense of what was happening here and the chaos and the pain and the suffrage. And because I think that's so important to know from whence you came.
Well, to paint the scene a little bit more clearly, we're in the midst of the ambush now. We had gotten to where the other platoon was. So mortar rounds are landing all around us. We have machine guns that are being fired at us from a village to the east of our position and a village to the west of our position. So we're literally triangulated in this complex ambush. Our vehicle is a mere 40 meters away, and it's just engulfed in flames. And you know, it's something I can't change, but it lives with me at all times, is that Private Vincent Winston did not make it out of the vehicle. And I got to the berm there and was trying to take cover. And this is where the gloves came off, was at this berm. I'm looking at the vehicle burning in front of me. And now I take accountability for the first time. And I said, where's everybody at? And I looked around and I didn't see Winston. And I said, where's Winston? And one of my squad leaders said, sir, he didn't make it.
It's just amazing seeing what the chaos going on around you. You gave up. There's a sense that you gave up your own sense of personal safety and concerns for that of your unit, which is an extraordinary trait. We're talking to Sam Brown, American patriot hero. And he's also candidate for Texas House District 102. We're going to take a short break and be back in a minute. We're going to talk about this remarkable recovery and some really cool things being done in San Antonio, as well as that State House race as well, when the Curtis Report continues in just a moment.
We are talking about American exceptionalism. Get involved with the conversation. Call in with your questions at 888-787-KLIF. It's about family, faith, and freedom. Now, let's get back to the Curtis Report with our host, Barry Curtis.
Thanks. Welcome back to the Curtis Report. A fascinating discussion here with Sam Brown, American patriot and hero. Also Republican candidate for Texas House District 102, which we're going to get to here in a little bit and talk about all things politics as it relates to that race there. We were talking before the break about the injury of Sam Brown, the IED, Humvee hitting the IED in Afghanistan. Amazing. You know what's interesting? I read, and I'll let you tell this story, but you had a conversation the day before this incident with your mother. What did your mother tell you?
Well, I actually had a couple of conversations. I didn't foresee what was coming, but I had a conversation with her, and I had a conversation with my brother, and she let me know that she was continuing to pray for me, and as it turns out, she had a feeling that something had happened that day and got a call a few hours later after I was wounded. And so there's something to be said for a mother's connection to their children. My brother told me something a little bit funny, and so he's deployed 3 times now to Afghanistan since I was wounded. And I was on the phone with him, and he just said, brother, you're invincible. They can't kill you. And so, you know, it was just a little bit of kind of going back to that warrior spirit thing we were talking about earlier. You know, you have to have some confidence in your ability to survive and to fight through whatever the challenges that lie ahead of you.
I just want to talk about, before we get to your recovery and the amazing work they're doing at Brook Medical Institution down there in San Antonio, right down the road here. Let's talk about your faith just for a moment. You stretched your arms out and said, Jesus, take you. Jesus, save you.
Mm-hmm.
That was not just a verbal um, you meant that.
Right. Well, it was instinctual, and it was both physical and spiritual. And I was raised by great parents who raised me going to church. I very much so was exposed to the gospel as a Christian, and yet I didn't understand and did not really fully devote my life to my Lord. And in that moment, I was asking for a physical saving, and as I look back on it, I was also screaming out for a spiritual saving as well.
Amen, brother. I like that. That's part of that remarkable story. You 5 days later ended up at Brooke Army Hospital in San Antonio. Lots of things happened while you were at Brooke Army Hospital in San Antonio. We'll get to the other part here in a minute. But you were part of some really cutting edge, and I'll let you explain some of the very horrific things that particularly burn victims have to go through, and those are subject to explosions. But you were also part of some cutting edge medical treatment for your pain there at Brooke Army Hospital.
Absolutely, it was a fascinating thing, and it was bittersweet as well to participate in this study. We were participating in a study specifically to see what impact or effect virtual reality has on pain. The bittersweet aspect of it was, because it was a study, I only got to do it twice because they were measuring for results, and before they can get to the FDA to say, hey, this actually has impact, to get it sanctioned for widespread use, which is skipping ahead to our maybe later conversation. Hey, that's maybe a little bit too much government regulation there. But no, it's very interesting. And the basic premise of integrating virtual reality and pain management is that when you involve your body physically in maneuvering a computer simulation, and you're also optically and audio involved in terms of watching this virtual reality and listening to what's going on in the virtual reality, your brain is oversaturated in inputs that it literally washes out the signals of pain coming from your extremities. And so let's take a step back. What is pain? Pain is a signal sent through your nervous system to your brain that says, ouch, something hurts. Your brain interprets it and says, hey, body, this is pain. So if you can, at the closest point to your brain through your eyes and ears, flood it with input, you can just wash out that pain to a certain extent.
And now, initially, when they did the studies, my research tells me they literally just went and got some video games off the shelf.
Yeah, I think that's what they started with, and then very quickly they had to kind of redefine that.
And so basically, it's based on just distracting your brain from the pain.
Right. Absolutely.
Wow, and it's just remarkable. And now the times that you did do it, did you feel different? Did you? Was it actually relief that you got?
There was actual relief, and so someone might say, well, gosh, Sam, what's the point in just playing some video games if you can take some medicine? Well, the point is, you can turn on and off a computer or a virtual reality system. When you take heavy-duty narcotics, that stays in your system for hours after you take it. In some cases, when you're on it routinely, days. And so there's much more clarity of mind if you can attack pain in that moment and then just turn off the treatment.
You actually, real quick, you returned to Afghanistan years later as part of Operation Proper Exit. I know you're doing some things that way. I didn't want to get out of the segment without talking about that real quick. Tell us about Proper Exit. And you're quite the how much, and I want to talk about how much humor plays in this too, because I've read some, and I got to read this. I think this is from this may be from Stars and Stripes. This just floored me here. If I can find the quote here, and I'll let you say it. But basically, the quote was that you were standing in front of a bunch of folks, and you said, apparently we've lost some very important parts of our body here, so we've lost accountability to these parts. So if you find them, let us know. And from what the news accounts reports, there was just uproar of laughing. How much does humor play into this? And then we'll get into Operation Proper Exit.
Humor's huge. I've seen it specifically in the wounded warrior community. It's the things that have happened to men and women in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other places in service to the country are physically extremely terrible things. And it's very easy to allow that to negatively define your life. Yeah. But no one wants to be negatively defined by an injury or a wound. And let's not overlook the internal wounds, those who've had traumatic brain injury or suffer with post-traumatic stress. Hey, these are very real things. Mm-hmm. No one wants to be negatively defined by that. And so humor is probably one of the original forms of entertainment. And so it's just very basic. And I happen to have an extremely dry sense of humor. So most people don't catch on to that very quickly. Well,
it was a hit there, for sure, according to the Stars and Stripes. And we're going to take our last break here. I'm going to come back and talk about a little bit more about Operation Proper Exit. We didn't get to that. And then also on the campaign for House Seat 102. The Republican challenger for Texas House District Seat 102, Sam Brown. We're talking, this is an amazing discussion. Love this show. We'll be back with more of the Curtis Report in just a moment.
Promoting and supporting some of the cornerstones of the American experience. It's all about family, faith, and freedom. Now, let's get back to the Curtis Report with our host, Barry Curtis.
Thanks, and welcome back to the Curtis Report in studio, all hour. With Sam Brown. He is the Republican candidate for Texas State House District 102. Fascinating discussion with Sam here and on his history and truly an American hero. Just amazing story here. We're going to jump into politics. You are running as a Republican candidate for Texas District 102. Just something of current events on a national level. First, in June, Sam, of 2009, President Obama proclaimed that if you have health care and if you like your own personal health care, you can keep it, period. Now, there wasn't any caveats. There were no exceptions. There were certainly no asterisk. In fact, it was fundamentally in the quote, period. Did the president mislead the American people?
I think that's how could you assume anything otherwise? Look, here's one of the problems with politics. And people say, well, Sam, you're a politician. Well, no, I'm not a politician. I've never been in politics. I'm a candidate. But the thing is, people will do or say whatever they need to do or say in order to get the outcome they desire. And, frankly, I think America's tired of that. Connectivity is a great thing. And people have an ability to go back and look at that quote where 20 years ago, it'd take a real gee whiz guy to go find that quote and bring it back up, 3-4 years later. So connectivity is great, but I don't know that politics have changed, which is a bad thing. And we need fresh new leadership running.
Speaking of which, you're in the race. Texas State House District 102, kind of for our listeners coast to coast, iHeartRadio. We've got listeners really literally around the country and around the world. Give us a geographic kind of breakdown of where your district is here in Texas.
So if you were to go to Google Earth and zoom in on the Dallas side of the DFW Metroplex, you'll find 635 directly north of Dallas. And the district is essentially Addison, North Dallas, part of Richardson, and even a little bit of Garland, north of 635 and up to the Collin County line.
So that's in Dallas, kind of north
North Dallas
east,
County.
kind of North Dallas County is the district that you're running for now. And that state house, so you'll be on the state level here in Texas, and that state house, District 102. Now this race is pretty crowded. Currently, that seat is filled by another person, Stephanie Carter, who originally had gotten out of the race to run for railroad commissioner, got back into the race now, is running again to defend her seat. There's other members running as well. It's a crowded race. Tell us what you offer that's different from Stephanie Carter and all the rest.
Yeah, I've got a vested interest in this community, and I tell people, and I don't mean this lightly. For the first time in over a decade, I've had the opportunity to choose a home, and my wife and I just got out of the military. I did 2 years ago. She did last year. We were down in San Antonio, and we looked at each other, and we had one son, we had a daughter on the way, and we said, we want to stay in Texas. Texas has been good to us. Texas is really God's country, and let's plant our roots in Dallas and really invest in the community there. And so I've got a wife. I've got 2 kids. I've got a small business. I've got a vested interest in this community, and I'm not going anywhere. I haven't moved into this district. I'm not planning on moving out of the district. I'm here, and I don't know the personal histories of all the other candidates, but that's what I offer.
We in the politics of the state of Texas, we have what's called a rainy day fund. For whatever that may be worth. We seem to dip in it when we need it, but a rainy day fund. Now, just generally speaking, just because we have a rainy day fund doesn't mean that the state doesn't have debt.
Right.
Kind of reckon that with us. What does that mean?
Well, the state, like any other entity, has the ability to borrow money, and so here in Texas, we're no different than many other entities. The good thing is that people before us saw the wisdom in setting up a rainy day fund, and I don't think that they ever envisioned that it would grow the way it has grown since really fracking has helped to boost those revenues. And so we can applaud their wisdom and vision there, and I think though that just because it has been incredibly profitable to the state doesn't mean that we shouldn't still treat it with reverence.
Absolutely. Tell us what is after you win your election, what are the top 1, 2, or 3 issues that you consider we need to have focus on? What are those burning issues there?
Education, I think, is always going to be an issue, and it's something that's personal to me with my 2 small kids, and they're going to be going through the system, and so what's unique for me in my position is I'll have an opportunity to legislate on things that will impact my kids as they're being raised and going through the education system here in Texas. And so House Bill 5 did a lot of things, and I think that we're starting to see the importance of bringing back local control. Mm-hmm. Bureaucrats and politicians in Austin don't need to mandate how education happens. Parents, teachers, students and former students, local school boards, they know what's best for their particular school district, and I think that we need to continue to push towards that.
Tell me about in that area of District 102, we've seen some pretty rapid growth, business, industry-wise. You're a businessman. You're making payroll. You've got to make payroll. That's a difference in perhaps in other politicians or even other candidates who are running for the same office that you're in. Tell us about the climate here in North Texas for business. Is it still as good as what the governor says it is?
I think the climate's great. That doesn't mean that there's not risks to it. And so when we have some folks that are talking about ways of increasing the state's revenues, well, Hey, when you're talking about increasing state revenues, are you saying that our current revenues aren't enough? Are you telling me that you're spending the taxpayers' money wisely, every penny of it? Are you telling me there's no duplication, there's no waste in agencies and commissions? I don't fundamentally believe that's even possible. And so I've seen it as a businessman. I know that others have seen it, that there's hurdles and burdens that you have to take on. And we can decrease that. But Texas is still the city on a hill. Look, we've got people flocking here from all over the country, and we need to keep it that way. And smart leadership who are familiar with running businesses, what it means to balance a budget, what it means to make payroll, what it means to make, in my case, life and death decisions on the battlefield, and now business decisions in the boardroom. We need those folks representing us down in Austin.
You've got some fascinating things on your website. Some really insightful things that tell us even more about you and where you stand on a lot of these issues. What's that website address? We just about a minute left. What's that website address?
Yeah, you can go find me at brownfortexas.com. And look, I love to communicate. Like you, I'm up in the modern time, so I love to communicate on Facebook with anyone who's interested in just engaging in a conversation. There's links to that on the website. Also, if you just Google Sam Brown for Texas, you're going to find 3 or 4 links to Twitter, Facebook, my campaign website, brownfortexas.com. Please learn about what I stand for and know that I'm here to represent Texas and 102 well. Sam
Brown, conservative Republican candidate for State House District 102. It's been a fascinating discussion. You're truly an American. We have so many armchair politicians. Man, you've been out there. You've done it, brother. You paid the price. If ever I'm looking at a patriot, sir, it's you.
Thank you.
I thank you for your duty, your honor, your courage, sir. Thank you for being here. It's only one of those. Good guy. Come back and talk to us.
Will do. Thank you.
Let us know what's going on in the campaign. I hear the music. As we always say, on the 7th day, God rested and he thought. And on the 8th day, God made radio. We'll see you next week.
Conservative principles and the man who's not afraid to use them.
I can hear you!
Thanks for tuning in. The Curtis Report with Barry Curtis will be back next Sunday with a fresh take on the week's events and issues that matter to you.
Free at last! Free at last!
Join us next Sunday at 5 p.m. right here on your home for The Curtis Report, 570 KLIF.